Hello fellow coffee botherers, in this video we're going to be comparing the Sage Barista Express Impress with the Delonghi La Specialista Prestigio. I've compared the Express Impress with other Sage or Breville machines, but the most obvious machine from another brand to compare it with is this, the La Specialista Prestigio, as they both have the Tamp lever. Delonghi have the Maestro version of this too, but that's at a higher price point and appears to be aimed at the in-between home barista and bean to cup market. The Prestigio is more of a match to the Express Impress, both in terms of price point and features. Quite a few people have asked me to do this comparison for obvious reasons, and I've seen claims being made in threads and comments that the Sage Express Impress is just a Sage or Breville version of the La Specialista, and there's very little difference. In my opinion, no one who has used both of these machines would declare that to be the case. If you put a lump of cheese and a lump of chalk next to each other and declare that there's no difference between them, that's basically what people are doing when they're saying that these are the same machine. But more on that shortly. So let's look at all the stats first, and we'll put these on the screen rather than reading them all out. As you can see, the La Specialista is a bit bigger than the Express Impress. It's about 3 centimeters taller, wider and deeper. The Barista Express has 17 more grind settings, 25 versus 8. They both have a Tamp lever. The Express Impress is calibrated to 10 kilograms. The Express Impress has the intelligent dosing system and manual dosing. The La Specialista just has manual dosing. There's a mention of a dose sensor in the blurb, but I can't find any evidence of that, as I'll explain in a sec. The Express Impress has a 54mm portafilter and the La Specialista has a 51mm. The Express Impress comes with the standard and pressurised baskets, and the La Specialista only comes with standard baskets, but I'm not sure if there's some pressurisation going on in the portafilter itself, which I'll get to a bit later. The Express Impress has a locking hopper, so you can easily remove the beans. The La Specialista doesn't. To save me from multitasking, I'm going to make coffee on both machines while I review. So let's have a little talk about the Barista Express Impress first while I make a flat white with it. For a deep dive on the Impress, check this playlist. This machine is amazingly intuitive to use. Even if you've not used a portafilter espresso machine before, the learning curve you have to go through in order to get great cup quality from this is very small. The level of user friendliness is brilliant. This is something that Sage or Breville do better than any other coffee machine brand I've ever experienced. When it comes to cup quality, and importantly when it comes to consistent cup quality from one coffee to the next, the reason the Express Impress does so well in this regard is not just because of the Tamp lever. It's far more about the intelligent dosing system than it is about the tamping. Having said that, the Tamp lever on the Impress is calibrated to 10 kilograms, so it's exactly the same Tamp every time, and although I can't do any tests to prove that, the consistency of the shots this thing makes once you're dialed in is all the proof I need. But the intelligent dosing is really what makes the Impress so special. There are multiple variables that all work together to make a great shot of espresso. The most important shot-to-shot variables are the quality of the coffee, including the freshness of the beans, grind size, dose volume, meaning the height in the basket leaving the correct amount of headspace, ratio, meaning the relationship between the dose weight and espresso weight, puck prep, mainly in the form of the Tamp. There's other puck prep to look at, but Tamp is the most important. And with the Express Impress, we have 25 grind settings, which I think is okay for an integrated grinder machine. They're not for precision. In my opinion, they're for ballpark dialing in with the grind size. So 25 adjustments I think is okay. This machine handles the dose volume brilliantly. You hardly have to think about it. It has a sensor, so the first time you use it and whenever you switch beans or change grind size, the machine will guide you to getting the dose right by telling you to dose a bit more or telling you to trim some off with the razor tool if the dose is too high. Once the dose is right, you'll get a light next to the smiley face, and the machine learns, so the dose will be right every single time unless you change the grind size and or beans. This is amazing, and it deals with this really important variable that is often overlooked. The Tamp is also really important, as I've said, and it's not just that a specific Tamp pressure is required, as is often assumed, it's about consistency from shot to shot. Tamping with the Express Impress requires a really light press, and you get a definitive Tamp. You know when you've tamped, and there's no concern about whether you've applied the right amount of pressure. You just push, and it clicks, and then beeps. When it comes to ratio, the factory preset shot button on the Impres will usually result in roughly a 1:3 ratio or just under. You usually find that you have about 18 grams of ground coffee, and with the factory preset double shot button you'll usually end up with about 50ml or 50 grams of espresso. This isn't a bad starting point actually, although I think most people will benefit from resetting the volume a bit lower so that they get around 40ml of espresso for a 1:2 ratio, but this depends on your beans and your palate. See this video for more on ratio. Resetting the volume on this machine is very easy and quick to do, and you can also pull shots fully manually or semi-manually. The espresso quality with the Impres on fully assisted mode, I find it's really good. If you prefer, you can put it on manual mode. You can use a bottomless portafilter or remove the splitter and use a dosing funnel to allow you to do manual puck prep if you want to, but even without that, I think the shot quality is very impressive. The consistency of shots on this machine from one shot to the next is also very good, and it's mainly down to the calibrated tamp in combination with the intelligent dosing system that I think puts this machine heads and shoulders apart from the competing machines that may be fairly evenly matched in other areas such as temperature stability. Steaming milk with the Express Impress is also really straightforward. Well, straightforward as using a Pro Steam wand can be. There is a learning curve there, but Sage machines tend to be the easiest to learn on as they deliver enough steam power but not in an overly aggressive manner that can be difficult to control, as is the case with some machines. So overall, this machine is really nice to use to get consistently good shots of espresso and consistently good cup quality for cappuccino, latte, flat white and so on. Once you've used it a couple of times, most people will find the frustration to be minimal. Espresso can be very daunting, but this machine takes most of the stress out of the equation. So now let's talk about the Delonghi La Specialista Prestigio while I make a flat white with that. It's quite nice looking. It carries the well-known Delonghi brand and it has a couple of impressive things about it. This folding cup stand is a neat little feature. The Pro Steam wand is really big. It looks a bit more like a commercial steam wand, so that's promising at first glance. Obviously it has a tamping lever and it has the pressure gauge, as does the Impres. Going back to the important variables. Grind size, we have 8 grind settings. I don't understand what Delonghi are thinking here. I said the same with my La Specialista Arte review. Why have they given their home barista machines less grind settings than they give their bean to cup coffee machines? As I said earlier, I think integrated grinder machines are for ballpark dialing in, not precision. But with only 8 grind settings, that's a flipping big ballpark. I suspect this comes from the fact that the La Specialista started out as a pressurised basket machine, and they thought that 8 grind settings made sense for that. But then they decided to make it a standard basket machine, and all they did was to swap out the baskets. They didn't address the need for finer grind adjustments. With dose volume on the La Specialista, we have manual dosing only, and there's a rough guide in the manual to tell you where to set the dial depending on the roast profile of your beans. I know the blurb states that it has 2 sensors to deliver a consistent coffee dose, but from what I can gather, the only sensor it has relates to the hopper being empty. If I put the dose dial to minimum, I've been getting doses that are too low even to be tamped, and if I put it on maximum, the basket is completely overdosed, so I can't see where there's any dose sensing going on here. There's a line inside the basket that the manual instructs you to aim for. You can eyeball it, but only after tamping, so if you're over that line, what do you do? There's no razor tool with this machine. You could grab a teaspoon, I suppose, or you just tweak it for the next time. With the tamp on the La Specialista, there's no definitive click or beep or any kind of feedback to specify that you've tamped with the right amount of pressure. Also, surely whether or not the tamp is consistent is going to depend on the dose. If I set the dose lower and a tamp, you can see that virtually no pressure has been applied to the coffee in the basket. It's not at all like tamping with the Express Impress tamp lever, and I just can't quite understand how this is supposed to deliver consistent results. If anyone has this machine and has tips on this, please leave it in the comments below. The factory preset ratios with this is about 1 to 4.5 for espresso, which is a very big ratio versus the standard 1 to 2 for standard espresso or around 1 to 3 for a lungo. In theory, it shouldn't be a problem as you can reprogram the volumes. In practice though, I've not been able to reprogram the volumes as the manual states you can. The manual says you can reprogram a double shot to a minimum volume of 50 ml for a double shot. Even if you could, based on the average 17 gram dose I've found this basket tends to take at the dosing line in the basket, that's a 1 to 3. So a minimum pre-programmed dose of 1 to 3 seems high. But the minimum I've managed to get it to program to is 60ml for a double shot, so that's a 1 to 3.5 ratio. I think this is due to the minimum pre-infusion volume, as it seems to use a set amount of about 25ml of water for pre-infusion. It's not a huge deal. If you want a smaller ratio, it just means you need to pour the shots semi-manually by pressing the button to start and then clicking the OK button again to stop the shot when you get your desired ratio. There's a coffee setting too, which is basically another reprogrammable shot button, and at the factory preset it's about 1 to 5 ratio, which again seems a bit on the high side. There's also an Americano setting, and that's something that this has that the Express Impress doesn't have. With the Impress, you'd need to turn the water dial manually. On the Delonghi, the water will start automatically after the shot when you select Americano. In terms of espresso quality, for me, it's just not great. The shots look great, but there's a bit of a weird taste with every shot I've made with it. It tastes to me like pressurised basket espresso, in that I'm looking at great extraction, but I'm not tasting great extraction at all. I'm not sure if the shots are badly channeling because of the way the baskets are dosed and tamped, or whether it may actually be that there's some pressurisation going on in the basket. There's plastic inside the portafilter with some kind of circular channel, and I'm wondering if this is creating some kind of pressurisation, which would explain why the shots look great regardless of how they taste. This would also explain why they didn't do anything with the grinder if they were just swapping the standard baskets and putting the pressurisation into the portafilter itself. I'll do some playing around with this to see if I can figure it out, so if you're interested, subscribe and allow notifications. When it comes to the milk steaming, although I said the steam wand looks the part, the performance is a bit disappointing. Don't get me wrong, it'll do the job, but I just find the steam power is a bit lacklustre. As a result, I think it's a bit more difficult to get decent texture than with the Express Impress. I found that I have to stretch, pull air into the milk for quite a bit longer than I'd usually have to with any of the Sage or Breville machines. And I also find it a little bit disconcerting that there's a plastic straw type thing inside the steam wand. So overall, I find these to be chalk and cheese, as I said earlier. They may look similar, but to me they're just completely different machines. The Delonghi may look the part, but for me the espresso it produces is no better than the very low price pressurised basket machines that I've reviewed here in the past, in my humble opinion. The Barista Express Impress I've found to deliver consistently great cup quality, on par with using other standard basket machines. The way it centrally doses a basket, the calibrated tamp, the intelligent dosing, it all really does what it promises to, which is to assist the user to create better cup quality. From my experience with the La Specialista, the tamp lever, the clever sounding words they use in the blurb, all appears to be purely to sell the machine. I can't see any evidence that these features actually translate into cup quality. I'll put links to both of these machines in the description. It honestly doesn't matter to me personally which one you buy. They'll both be affiliate links, and that's the only way I stand to make money from either of these machines, but I think it's very obvious which one I personally prefer. According to NASA, 1 teaspoon of a neutron star weighs 6 billion tonnes, which has nothing to do with clicking the like button, but click the like button if you're wondering whether NASA used the Cayer Luna to weigh it. Thank you very much for watching, and if you love coffee and enjoyed this video, we've got tons of content about how to make better coffee at home to take you from beginner to home barista. We've got reviews and how-tos on the most popular machines. If you like the sound of that, click on my face to subscribe. Tatty Bye!